So let's talk about this remarkable new recording. I have to say that, I knew Justice Ginsburg, certainly from her reputation and from the media and from, various things that I'd read and seen about her. But after listening to this music, I feel like I know her on a much more intimate level.
Well, that is a lovely thing to say, Brad.
And that was the goal, so I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. So the title of the recording is Notorious RBG in Song, of course, going back to that, that nickname of hers that everybody knows and loves. But I wonder if you could maybe just start by telling us where that came from, because I didn't know. I'd heard it before, but I had not heard where it came from.
So it originated from a couple of, at the time, law students at New York University Law School who were truly incensed by the Supreme Court's decision in the voting rights case, where they basically threw out preclearance and told places that had discriminated against voters of color and whatnot that basically they could go back to doing it. And they were so inspired by Mom's dissent, which basically predicted exactly what happened, saying that if you throw out preclearance, it's like throwing out your umbrella in a rainstorm because you're not getting wet. And that inspired them to start this. Initially it was a Tumblr site. And, of course, Notorious RBG is a reference to the rapper The Notorious B.I.G.,
right? Yeah.
A fellow Brooklynite and wordsmith. And they even created their own rap, which I think you've actually watched, right?
Oh, yes. If you want to see something funny, it's still up on the web. Shana Knizhnik and Erin Carmen, who also published a wonderful book, which is called Notorious RBG. It's really a sort of a biography and a social commentary on and about her. They originated Notorious RBG, and we are all carrying it forward.
And it spread like wildfire.
Yeah. Well, there's a movie, there's a documentary. I just saw the other day there's some action figure on Kickstarter that's coming out.
Oh, funny.
I love it.
I heard there's a car air freshener also. So, of course, Justice Ginsburg has nothing to do with these products for sale. They're happening around her because she's a public figure.
Right.
But I like to joke that we're part of the cottage industry here now.
Well, she may not have endorsed those projects, but she certainly endorsed your project. And let's talk about your song cycle, Patrice, because it's really a remarkable series of these 9 songs that are so carefully laid out. And I'm fascinated by the idea of a singer writing music for themselves to sing.
Well, that's not exactly how it is, because I actually started out my life as a piano player and a coach, and I started writing music in high school. I didn't start singing until my last year of college. But then the bug bit, and by the time I left the Banff School of the Arts, which is a sort of a post-doctoral kind of program without a degree, I lived in Canada for 2.5 years, and I was both composing and singing. But I had to come back to the States, and I had to make a decision. And so I decided for singing, at least until I had time again to start writing. So for me, I feel like that geeky musician in a room by herself who happens to have this other persona that she puts on that is a singer.
Yeah.
And Patrice did not note that in between graduating Pomona College and the Banff Center, she got her master's at University of Minnesota, which included studying with Dominic Argento.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's all mixed up in there.
Now that you mention that, I almost think I could hear a few little Argentoisms in some of the...
Yeah, I really admire his work. I admire Stephen Sondheim's work so much.
Yeah.
But I'm a devotee of jazz, especially the music of Lori Laitman, who I've recorded several times now.
That's wonderful.
So,
what was the genesis of your song cycle, The Long View? When did you first get the idea for that?
Well, it's really Jim and Jane's fault, the children of RBG.
So for my mother's 80th birthday 5 years ago, we had the idea as a gift to commission 3 women composers to write songs on texts associated with my mother. Two of them were actually 50th birthday tributes, one of which my sister actually wrote, which became the infamous pot roast recipe that Vivian Fung, wonderful Chinese-Canadian composer based now in the United States, wrote. Then there was the very personal text of my father's letter to my mother that we found in his hospital room right before he passed away. It's a final love letter, My Dearest Ruth, that Stacy Garrop, a Chicago composer that Cedille has championed for many years now, that she said. And then the other one was the other 50th birthday tribute was by a typist in the steno pool at my father's law firm in New York, who described with some horror this shirt-sleeved lawyer showing up at the typing pool with pages and pages of yellow legal pads and handwritten notes from some lady lawyer about weird stuff like gender-based discrimination and how she had to type this nonsensical stuff. And it's actually a conversion story about how through typing these texts, she became a feminist herself.
Yeah.
So that was the song that Jim and Jane decided I should set. And boy, did that light a fire under me. It was so much fun, and people responded so well to hearing both a description of RBG and a personal story of change that I thought, I wonder if I can find enough of those kinds of stories to really create an arc for a song cycle. And
well, yeah, definitely. And the way that you've laid it out is so interesting. How did you assemble all of these texts?
Did a lot of time in the Library of Congress. Fortunately, I was given access to her materials there. Spoke with her biographers. Spent time interviewing family members. And I knew I wanted to include the dissenting opinions as much as possible.
Yeah.
So I culled those and found 5 that I felt were really essential and could be set to music. So it runs the gamut from these very personal stories like Anita's story of typing and being converted to feminism to the most public of Justice Ginsburg's writings, her dissents, that she actually reads from the bench.
It sounds almost like researching to write a novel or something like that.
It felt very much like that, I must say. And the number of words in this song cycle approaches a novella, I must also say.
Well, and that brings me to sort of the style of composition, and the songs themselves are almost conversational, but they're very lyrical. Can you talk a little bit about the way that you set them and what you wanted to achieve with your music?
Well, thank you for the lyrical part. I want to achieve lyricism because singers really enjoy singing something that feels good, but it also has to be meaningful. And with the sheer number of words, you can't really hang around and repeat yourself too much.
Right.
So really the texts themselves dictated a great deal of the form. But I did get my fun in there too. In the very last song, the 9th song in the cycle, this is a question that an audience member at a conference asks Justice Ginsburg. What does she believe a president should look for in a Supreme Court justice? And what does she think about the current state of polarization? So she goes on at length describing the various qualities that she believes a justice should have. And then she says, and the second part of your question was polarization. And rather than going on in words, I have her singing an extended vocalese, high-flying roulades and cascades that are so much fun and also describe both her fantasy career that she often talks about, being a grand opera diva, and her ability to deftly sidestep things that might not be appropriate to discuss in public. Yeah.
Well, you bring up so many things that are hallmarks, I think, of her style that you captured very nicely in your song cycle. Her clarity, even just the last 2 movements that have those little snippets of her dissent and then what you just talked about, the question answered. A great deal of clarity and insight that is just very simple. You know, it's like something that is obvious, but you wouldn't necessarily think of it. And then her sense of humor, I think, really comes through.
Yes.
And that's something that people don't necessarily think about all the time.
Yes, well, when you look at the little old Bubby nowadays, it's hard to see, everything about her that she has been and carries with her inside. But it's there. And one thing I'm really proud of about the disc is also it's accompanied by 2 booklets that have quite a lot of essay material. Yeah. I wrote a piece from my own perspective about her. James wrote a piece, and there are little descriptions of each of the songs in the cycle, and each of the composers contributed. Plus, there's tons of photographs.
Yeah, so. I've been enjoying it and reading through the lyrics that you've chosen for these songs really enhances listening to it as well. This is one of those projects that you have to kind of dive in head first.
No, we're really happy to hear from friends and even people we don't know that are writing in already since the disc was released, how they're listening to it multiple times or sitting and reading and then listening back and forth. So it's something that I think people will come back to over and over again.
Yeah. Can we just talk briefly about a couple of the other composer songs that are on the disc? I know you mentioned from the original 3, the pot roast recipe, which is hilarious.
Well, it's something my sister created at the 50th birthday. Of course, it's not exactly what you would find in a cookbook because, first of all, the dish is a truly horrible dish. I love the description of getting all the charred remains off the side of the pot with the claim that this dubious-looking encrustation is the best part. But they're also in between the cooking instructions, real reflections on the Ginsberg family household, such as rewrite your child's English essay. And then, of course, all the culinary cautions that are real events from Mother's past before we retired her from the kitchen, such as the reference to the sliced ham, the roast ham with sliced thumb, and the singeing your eyebrows because you waited too long after turning on the gas to light the oven. So all of that is in this so-called recipe, and then it's particularly delicious that Vivian chose as the basis of her setting. Clearly, it's an
homage.
An homage, yes, exactly the word, to Bernstein's La Bonne Cuisine.
All right, yeah. Another thing that really struck me in this entire project was the sense of intimacy that you can achieve through the music and through the words, and I think that's really represented in that love letter, James, that your father wrote and you discovered. You were there in the room with her when she found that letter, right?
Yeah, I had flown into Washington or into Baltimore to met my mother at Johns Hopkins, and I was, and at that point, my father was repeating one word, the word home, making it clear that he did not want to be in that hospital room any longer. So we took him home, and we're clearing out his things, and we open a drawer, and that's where we find the yellow legal pad with the handwritten love letter. Both, just a look at his life with my mother and the decision that had to be made in his final days. And it's incredibly touching just to read it. And then the music that Stacy adds to give it that extra pathos is just really remarkable.
Yeah, it's a lovely recording. I know we've got just a little bit of time left, but I wanted to end talking briefly about the last track on the disc, which comes from that opera, Scalia Ginsberg. And it's such a tour de force. When I listened to that, Patrice, I was completely blown away at your singing.
Thank you. When I first heard the aria, it was a Glimmerglass opera, and Jackie Nichols sang it, and I thought, oh my God, can I sing that? I wasn't sure. But once we decided this was actually a recording project, I said to myself, I've got to see if I can sing this. Yeah. And it's been a load of fun. It starts with operatic excerpts. How many times must I tell you, dear Mr. Justice Scalia? So it's a Carmen reference, and shortly after that, he moves it into a jazz waltz, and then onto a gospel section, which has a lot of fun for people like me who like to sing high notes. So Yeah, it's quite the piece, and it makes its case for flexible law. So you have to be a flexible singer.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I just love the whole idea of their friendship, Anthony Scalia and RBG, it united over opera. I think
Indeed. And there's a beautiful picture of that in the booklet, close-up of them both dressed in their La Traviata gear as supernumeraries at the Washington Opera.
That's
in
wonderful.
Ariadne of Naxos, actually. Yes.
Sorry.
But no, but I think the costumes may have come from a La Traviata
so.
production, but of course, that opera has an audience on stage of courtiers, and they were dressed as two of the courtiers.
Yeah, fantastic. That's what I call luxury casting. Well, I want to thank you both, Patrice Michaels and James Ginsberg, for your time today. It's a wonderful album, Notorious RBG in Song, available, of course, from Cedille Records, and we'll link to all of that from our website at wgte.org. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Brad.
Well, this has been real fun.
Great to talk to you.